AC/DC, Led Zeppelin, Johnny Cash, and Nirvana. These are just a few of the rock and roll legends that have been given the honor of being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Whether someone is inducted posthumously or not, the recognition is only given to those who have helped to shape the genre of rock and roll and keep it moving forward. While getting into the Hall of Fame isn't the goal of the majority of musicians, it is clear when certain artists are deserving. 25 years after a group or artists release their first album, they become eligible to be inducted. These are the artists who meet all of the criteria but aren't in the Hall of Fame for some reason. Keep reading through this list and leave a comment with who you think should make it or if we forgot someone. Let's dive into this list of yet-to-be-recognized rock heroes. In the United Kingdom, the idea of leaving the Jam out of a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame would be blasphemous, as they all but single-handedly created the mod variant of the late 70s UK punk scene. Indeed, they emerged around the same time as The Clash and the Sex Pistols, yet they're the only ones of the three who haven't been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. This is the reality despite the fact that they've certainly had more of a long-term influence on British rock music than the latter group and can rival The Clash in what they accomplished in an even shorter time together. Some people may say that this weary-haired flutist and his band don't deserve to be in the same Hall of Fame as bands like Led Zeppelin and Chuck Berry. However, the fact that they beat Metallica for the first ever Grammy for hard rock metal in 1989 is evidence enough. The group first achieved success in 1969, when they reached number 1 in the UK with the album Stand Up. After that, they transitioned to have a more progressive rock style. The albums throughout their career were well received, and they ended up selling around 60 million records worldwide. Among those albums, he had 11 gold and 5 platinum albums. Rolling Stone even described them as being one of the most commercially successful and eccentric progressive rock bands. Iron Maiden is an English heavy metal band that was assembled in 1975 in Leyton, East London. In the 1980s, the group began to achieve commercial success and became known as primary pioneers of new wave British heavy metal. During that time, the band experienced numerous changes in its lineup but went on to release several gold and platinum albums in both the UK and the United States. In total, the band's discography has reached 38 albums, with 16 studio albums, 12 live albums and 7 compilations. Unfortunately, the band never had a crossover hit that became popular with groups other than metalheads. This is the only explanation as to why the group is yet to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. While their music may not have been the most elegant work out there, that was all but the point of why the New York Dolls have such an important place in rock history. The stripped-down style that they pioneered in the early 1970s would end up having a foundational influence on the American punk scene before the decade was out. With that in mind, it seems deeply unusual that the New York Dolls would be omitted from the annals of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, especially considering some bands they've influenced have since been inducted. However, they were nominated in 2021, so time will tell. Pixies were formed in 1968 in Boston, Massachusetts. They were another band that emerged from alternative rock, which became a massively popular genre. However, their style, song structures, and lyrics by Black Francis differentiated them from the rest. After rising in popularity in the United States, they eventually became a worldwide phenomenon. Although, at the time, they didn't have very many albums, and the ones they did have sold modestly, they have been credited as being a direct influence on other high-profile bands. Nirvana, Radiohead, Blur, Weezer, and others all reference Pixies. Even artists like David Bowie, U2, Kings of Leon, and Arcade Fire give them a nod. Considering that every trendy kid in the world owns a Joy Division t-shirt, you would think that they are popular enough to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Yet, that's not the case. Formed in 1976 in Salford, Greater Manchester, the band is credited as being pioneers of the post-punk scene. Their debut album Unknown Pleasures became a massive success, although their success was short-lived when lead singer-songwriter Ian Curtis took his own life in 1980. 2 months later, the band put out Order, with the single, Love Will Tear Us Apart, which became a worldwide sensation. Today, they are still referenced by many successful musicians of all genres as being one of their primary influences. As alternative music fans know, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has actually had 2 chances to honor members of Joy Division, as the surviving members formed a second band called New Order in the wake of lead singer Ian Curtis's passing. The band has proved more commercially successful than Joy Division over the years, but have also proved no less influential as a band who artistically blended their rock and electronic sensibilities. However, it seems 2025 could be the year where the organization corrects a historic oversight, as New Order has been nominated in recognition of both the band itself and Joy Division. Soundgarden was a grunge band formed in Seattle, Washington in 1984. The band was comprised of singer and guitarist Chris Cornell, lead guitarist Kim Thayil, bassist Hiro Yamamoto, and drummer Matt Cameron. Soundgarden has been credited as being one of the main creators of grunge music, and other bands such as Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and Alice in Chains fell in behind them. Their 1994 album Superunknown debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 and also produced Grammy-winning songs like Black Hole Sun and Spoon Man. As of 2012, the band had sold over 25 million records worldwide and was ranked number 14 in VH's Special 100 Greatest Artists of Hard Rock. Although prospects for their induction seemed grim after even Cornell's death in May 2017 didn't appear to compel the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to act, Soundgarden was finally inducted in 2025. One of the biggest luminaries in the emotionally raw and sonically diverse grunge scene, Alice in Chains was helmed by guitarist Jerry Cantrell and lead singer Lane Staley. Whether their songs were loud and angry or somber and contemplative, they spoke profoundly to life's mysteries and the vicious cycle of addiction. Their brilliant, haunting MTV Unplugged performance from 1996 also rivals Nirvana's, and Alice in Chains has been able to soldier on with quality work even after Staley's tragic passing in 2002. Yet, while the band has been informally recognized by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they have never been inducted. Ronnie James Dio, or simply, Dio, is remembered for his raging compassion for the lost rock and roll children in his audience. During his 50-year career, he was a heavy metal singer, songwriter, and musician. He was the front man and founder for numerous groups including Rainbow, Black Sabbath, Elf, Dio, and Heaven and Hell. Known for his medieval lyricism and imagery, he is also credited with starting the rock devil horns hand gesture. Over the course of his career, he was awarded the Rock Guru Award, Rock Honor, Best Metal Singer, and more. Although he passed away in 2010, Dio himself is yet to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. However, he has been inducted into several others. Considering how many top 10 hits they had during a classic era of rock and roll, how eclectic their sound was when they notched those hits, and how much other artists have covered them since, it seems utterly baffling that Tommy James and the Shondells, or even just James himself, haven't been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Throughout the 60s, the band had 8 top 10 hits, with 2 of them going to number 1, and one of those number 1 hits, Crimson and Clover, joining their other hits like Moni Moni and I Think We're Alone Now in the library of classic rock standards. Coming out of Stockton, California, Pavement is an American rock band that formed in 1989. The band originally had no intentions of becoming famous, but after they gained underground attention, they began to focus on their sound and really put added effort into their music. The group had a 10-year career where they released 5 full-length albums and 9 EPs. Their hit song, Cut Your Hair, caught the attention of the public and established them as a legitimate indie rock group. Although they passed up major record labels to stick with independent ones, they're now considered one of the most influential bands to come out of the underground in the 1990s. Many indie rock groups today can trace their roots back to Pavement, who played a huge role in the development of the genre. In fairness, the day may soon come when the eclectic, often unpredictable artist Beck is inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, as he was nominated in 2022. Whether he is or not, however, it's impossible to deny the impact his unusual, cryptic, and genre-bending sonic experiments had on the 90s alternative scene. However, his influence reaches beyond that, because while classics like Mellow Gold and Odelay remain beloved and respected by music fans the world over, his somber, quieter direction in 2002's Sea Change also brought him a great deal of acclaim. Considering how productive and consistently good he's been since, it's high time for his induction. Hailing from Huntington Park, California in 1981, Slayer is a thrash metal band with a reputation for being involved with more than a few controversies. However, the band has also been considered to be one of the most influential groups in thrash metal, with their third album Rain in Blood described as one of the most influential thrash albums of all time. Over the span of their career, the group has won Grammy Awards, Kerrang! Awards, Metal Storm Awards, and more. They have also been considered the best of the Big Four bands, which consist of Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax, and themselves. These guys are about as rock and roll as it gets and deserve to join the other greats in the Hall of Fame. Perhaps because they tended to be a little more lighthearted and harder to pigeonhole than their new wave contemporaries, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has historically underrated the B-52s. Yet, they're not just a silly band who sings about love shacks and rock lobsters. Although their output has been sparse since their 1989 classic Cosmic Thing, that record was the result of a decade of critically acclaimed and popular work. Fred Schneider's distinctive yelping has also mixed great with Kate Pearson and Cindy Wilson's harmonies. Regarded by many as this generation's Velvet Underground is Sonic Youth. Based in New York City, Sonic Youth began playing together in 1981. Early on, the band established itself as a noise rock group, using unusual guitar tunings and distortions to give the rock guitar a whole new sound and use. Numerous music critics and fans believe they were one of the major players in the development of the alternative and indie rock movements that we see today. Their influence is obvious on today's countless indie rock bands who owe their identity to Sonic Youth. Although the band may have never reached the success and heights of others, their contribution to the progression of rock music is undeniable and will continue to have an impact as time goes on. After peaking in the late 60s and early 70s, legendary Canadian rock band The Guess Who have been eligible for induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame since 1991. However, it still hasn't happened despite grassroots fan campaigns and the consternation of key guitarist Randy Bachman. Although one might expect a band who notched 5 top 10 hits in 5 years, including an enduring #1 hit in American Woman, it seems the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has remained unmoved. The reason why is certainly mysterious. After Randy Bachman left The Guess Who in 1970, he formed another band with his brothers Robbie and Tim, along with bassist Fred Turner, called Bachman-Turner Overdrive. Indeed, this band would prove a popular one as well, as they were also able to notch 5 top 40 hits throughout the 70s. Much like during his time in The Guess Who, Bachman was also able to score a #1 hit, this time thanks to a joke song about his brother Gary's stutter that wasn't supposed to be released called, You Ain't Seen Nothin' Yet. Once again, however, Bachman-Turner Overdrive has been snubbed by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, though they were inducted into the Canadian Music Hall of Fame. If you consider yourself a rock connoisseur, you know who the Smiths are and why they deserve a place in the Hall of Fame. Even though they're viewed to be an underground band by some music snobs, their mark on music is undeniable. Formed in Manchester in 1982, they grew in popularity and were considered the most important group to come from the 1980s British independent music scene. The band's sound comes from their emphasis on the classic rock instruments of guitar, bass, and drums, but are mixed with rock and post-punk tendencies. Although the band dissolved in 1987, their influence remains. They have been nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in the past but to no avail. Understanding their impact, it's only a matter of time. King Crimson is an English rock band that has seen more progression and changes than most bands ever have. Forming in 1968, they were a massive influence on the rock movement of the early 1970s and continued to be so today. They didn't stop there, the times changed, and the band followed suit. Throughout the years, the group has adjusted their musical direction and have also been credited with heavily influencing the new wave scene, as well as the creation of math rock in the early 1980s. Altogether, 21 different musicians have been members of the band, and they've influenced more genres than one over the course of their existence. Yet, they still haven't made it into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame yet. While Nirvana has since been lauded as the defining band of the 90s alternative music boom, Smashing Pumpkins were one of their fiercest competitors in that department both in terms of creative ambition and commercial success. Like Nirvana and other grunge acts, Smashing Pumpkins were able to rock hard while also getting quiet and contemplative with personal, emotional lyrics. Although alternative rock albums like Gish and Siamese Dream made them a deeply respected and buzzed about act, the pinnacle of their success and perhaps their greatest creative triumph was the 1995 double album Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness. Blending blistering, hard-edged wailing and lush, gentle art rock, that album alone warrants induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Sometimes, it's just hard to know how to categorize an artist, and that seems to be a big millstone in the way of Weird Al Yankovic's inclusion in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's prestigious annals. Yet, in a world where rap and country artists can be inducted, there seem to be fewer and fewer excuses not to induct him nowadays. Interestingly, that seems to be something that the Hall of Fame's chairman John Sykes acknowledged to People, saying, Weird Al has come up in conversations. He's a genius. Perhaps an induction is on the horizon for him after all? Although other proto-metal pioneers like Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin have seen their own inductions into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Blue Cheer have not received that honor despite making a similar impact. While they didn't have a long period in the spotlight during their heyday, their album Vincebus Eruptum and their song, Summertime Blues, did nonetheless chart. However, whether this consideration entered into the decision to ignore them or not, the members of Blue Cheer have since made it clear that an induction would be wasted on them. They don't care to be inducted, and some in the band have stated that they're unlikely to show up for the ceremony if it happens. Considering how many members they had, it's perhaps unsurprising that the late 60s hit-making visionaries in Blood, Sweat, and Tears would be able to develop such a lush, full sound to their work. For whatever reason, however, their triumphs seem to have been largely forgotten in the cultural zeitgeist compared to some of their contemporaries. However, it doesn't change the fact that they had 3 hits that made it to number 2 in 1969 and 1 that made it to number 14 in 1970. It also doesn't change what an unforgettable listening experience their debut album Child is Father to the Man is. Although the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame hasn't inducted the band itself, they at least inducted its founding leader, Al Kooper, in 2023. While the 90s saw an explosion of jam bands claiming their place in the decade's expansive alternative revolution, none embodied the Grateful Dead's influence on the scene quite like Phish. Known for staggering jam sessions that transformed their songs live, Phish kept the earthy spirit of the 90s jam band craze alive even into the 2000s. Indeed, they began the new millennium with perhaps their most accomplished album, Farmhouse. Yet, despite winning the fan vote for induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2025, they still haven't received that honor. Few bands embody the spirit and attitude of rock and roll more than Motley Crue. For instance, bassist Nikki Sixx was pronounced dead from a heroin overdose only to wake up, break out of the hospital, and return to partying. Although we don't encourage such behavior, that's very rock and roll. If their persona wasn't enough, since the band's inception in Los Angeles, California in 1981, they have sold more than 100 million records worldwide, with 25 million being sold in the United States alone. They also have quite the resume of hit songs such as Dr. Feelgood, Kickstart My Heart, and Girls, 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 among others. Event though they've been inducted into the Hollywood Walk of Fame, the same can't be said for the Rock Hall of Fame. Appropriately for their name, the Cult have largely been more of a band with a dedicated following than one that saw much commercial success, at least in the United States. Curiously, the song they're most known for, She Sells Sanctuary, didn't actually chart in America. Although chart success hasn't always influenced induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, there were few other reasons why such a consistently respected band as the Cult remains ignored by the selection committee. Admittedly, Blue Oyster Cult weren't the biggest hitmakers during their heyday, as only 2 of the singles they released from 1976 to 1984 have been top 40 hits for them. Indeed, even the biggest of them didn't make the top 10 when it was first released. However, cultural references and revitalized play since their most successful years have since made Don't Fear the Reaper a beloved classic. However, it seems that one classic song, and the solid album it's from, Agents of Fortune, isn't quite enough to warrant the band's inclusion into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Whether he meant to or not, Weezer frontman Rivers Cuomo caused a little confusion in 2023 that led fans to believe that Weezer had been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Instead, the band was just invited to visit, though they have been eligible for induction since 2020. On the one hand, it's somewhat understandable that they would struggle to get inducted, as Weezer has had one of the more inconsistent discographies in rock history. Nonetheless, their self-titled debut and their 1996 album Pinkerton remain all-time classics, and the band was able to right the ship admirably after their low period from the mid-2000s to the mid-2010s. Known as a pleasant and harmonious folk rock trio, America notched a decade of top 10 hits starting in the early 70s, after they shot to number 1 for 3 weeks for their signature song, A Horse with No Name. It wouldn't be their last number 1 hit, either, as Sister Golden Hair achieved the same honor in 1975. In the time since they burst onto the scene, America have won multiple Grammy Awards, as well as earned induction into the Vocal Group Hall of Fame in 2006. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, however, has continued to elude them.